My name is Lena Carter. I'm 35 years old. And at my sister's wedding, my seat was a brown folding chair pushed against the kitchen doors. Every single guest in that barn had a place card with their name written in perfect gold script. My ex had won, the bride's college friends had won, even the woman who only came for the free bar had won. The woman who paid $21,000 for that wedding did not. When I asked about it, my sister smiled in her white dress and said, loud enough for the people around us to hear, "That's where the +1 sit." So I walked to the gift table, picked up the silver box with my name on it, turned around and said clearly, "+1 this." Then I walked out. She ran after me in front of everyone, silk train in her fists, guests watching from the porch, but here's what none of them knew. The final bills for that perfect wedding had not even arrived yet. And what I did next cost my family far more than one folding chair. I run a small accounting firm outside Columbus, Ohio. 4 employees. 1 coffee maker. A bell on the door that still makes me smile. My clients are farmers, shop owners, retired teachers, people who count every dollar because they earned every dollar. I built that office myself 6 years ago, the same year my father died. Dad was a mechanic, rough hands, soft heart. He used to sit at the kitchen table with his old green ledger and say, "Numbers don't lie, Lena. People do the lying for them." I thought he was teaching me bookkeeping. He was teaching me how to survive my own family. After the funeral, somebody had to keep the lights on for my mother. Somebody had to make sure my younger sister Chloe finished her interior design courses. Somebody had to fix the water heater and deal with the insurance letters. Nobody asked me. The job just slid across the table like an unpaid invoice, and I signed for it. For 6 years I told myself that was love. Every month, $700 left my account for my mother's utilities and homeowner's insurance. Auto pay, she never saw a bill, so she never felt the need to say thank you. 2 years ago her roof started leaking. I paid for the new one. Last year Chloe's car died a week before her first big client meeting. I paid for the transmission too. I wrote every single expense in my father's green ledger, not because I plan to collect, because I'm an accountant. You write things down. My mother Diane stood in the church fellowship hall every Sunday and told the ladies, "We've managed just fine." As if the money appeared through prayer and good posture. My name never came up. Then Chloe got engaged. Derek Hall, nice smile, commission job, lease truck that cost more than his salary some months. My mother lit up like someone had plugged her back into the wall. "A Hall wedding," she kept saying, hand on her chest. Our family joined with the Halls. Then she turned to me and delivered the second sentence after the engagement. "You know weddings run about $40,000 these days, honey." Not a question, a forecast. By spring I had put $21,000 into that wedding, $9,000 for the barn venue, $7,000 for catering, $3,000 for flowers, $2,000 for photography. Every contract had my signature on it, because vendors like the person whose money is real. Whenever a payment was due, my mother would appear at my office. "Just give me the check, sweetheart. You're so busy." Whenever the Halls asked about costs at planning dinners, she would fold her hands and say, "It's all taken care of, we believe in doing things right." The checks were mine. The sentence was hers. I asked Chloe once while she was addressing invitations at my kitchen table, "Does Derek's family know how this wedding is actually being paid for?" She didn't even look up. Why does it matter? It's family money. I let it go. I shouldn't have. In April she sat me down at a coffee shop, public place, bad sign, and told me the bridal party would be her college girls and Derek's cousins. "Patricia wants a certain look for the photos. You get it, right?" I was 35. Apparently I would curdle the pictures. I asked her straight, "Chloe, is there a reason I keep getting moved to the edges of this wedding?" She squeezed my hand and said something that almost sounded kind. "Lena, you're the backbone, not the decoration." Bones, as it turns out, are the last thing anyone thanks. The rehearsal dinner was at an Italian place with long tables. My seat was at the far end next to the coffee station. My mother stood, lifted her glass, and glowed. "When Frank passed, I promised myself my baby girl would still have everything. And tonight, look around. I made it happen." The room applauded. Patricia Hall dabbed her eyes. Derek raised his glass to my mother like she was a war hero. I sat by the coffee machine holding a breadstick. 2 seats down, my Aunt Ruth, Dad's sister, allergic to nonsense, frowned at the seating chart the planner had left near the gifts. "That's not the chart I saw last week," she muttered. I barely registered it. I wish I had. Wedding morning started at 7 a.m. with the florist near tears. Her refrigerated van had died overnight. A third of the centerpieces were wilted. Vendors only take instructions from the name on the contract. That name was Lena Carter. While my sister got her hair curled and my mother got her makeup airbrushed, I was at a wholesale flower market with a cart, buying every white rose they had, loading buckets into my trunk. I texted my mother, flower emergency, handling it. Her reply came fast, don't bother the girls with this. Handle it quietly. I got to the barn by 10 and spent 2 hours stripping thorns until my thumbs were raw. Around noon, the wedding planner, Dana, stuck her head in. She looked at me a beat too long. Your family, right, the sister? I said I was. She frowned at her clipboard. I had you somewhere else on my chart. There must have been then her earpiece crackled and she was gone. I have replayed that half sentence more times than I want to admit. The ceremony was beautiful. I sat in the third row. First row, my mother and the Halls. Second row, Derek's cousins and the bridal party overflow. Third row, the sister who paid for the roses in the arch. When Chloe came down the aisle, none of it mattered for a minute. She had Dad's eyes. I cried like everybody else, because I loved her. I need you to know that before everything else happens. Then the chairs emptied toward the barn for cocktail hour. I hung back to settle the flower market payment on my phone. One last quiet fix. The barn had been transformed. Fairy lights, long farm tables, linen runners near the entrance, a table of place cards in looping gold script. I came in late from the flower bill, smoothed my dress, and went looking for the C's. Carter, 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 nothing. I stood there while guests reached around me plucking their names. I flagged down Dana. She scrolled her tablet with a professional frown that kept getting less professional. You're not on my final chart, she said. I'm so sorry, there must have been a change. There's overflow seating by the service doors. She walked me there herself, past table 1 where my mother sat centered among the halls like a jewel, past table 5, past the band. To the back wall of the barn, beside the double doors where the catering staff banged through with trays, there stood a single brown folding chair. Someone had thrown a white cloth over it. No table, no place card. Just a folding chair in the service lane, close enough to the kitchen that I could feel the fryer heat every time the doors swung. Dana said the word final again. And something in the back of my head lit up like a check engine light. That's not the chart I saw last week. Ruth's voice from the rehearsal dinner. I was still standing there doing that math when a wall of white silk came gliding toward me. My sister's voice, bright as a bell, there you are. Chloe, I said, keeping it gentle. There's been a mix-up with the seating, I'm not on the chart. She looked at the folding chair, then at me. She didn't miss a step. 2 bridesmaids flanked her. A cluster of Derek's people stood close enough to hear everything over the band. Oh, that's the overflow seat, she said with a little laugh light as frosting. That's where +1s sit? I waited for her to hear it. She didn't. Somebody behind her chuckled. A bridesmaid studied her champagne, and I stood there in the dress I'd bought for her wedding beside the chair by the kitchen, and I looked around that barn for the first time in 14 months. My mother at table 1, laughing with her hand on Tom Hall's sleeve. The teenage cousin from the rehearsal, seated. The man in the golf shirt who filmed the ceremony on his phone, seated. And at table 5 with his name in gold script, Kyle Brennan, my ex. The man I dated for 2 years before he took a job in Cincinnati, invited because he works with Derek. Kyle had a real seat at my sister's wedding, and I had a folding chair in the fryer exhaust. Every guest in that barn had a place, except the one who had paid for the barn. Something in me went very quiet and very clear. The way a spreadsheet goes clear when the last bad number finally shows itself. I didn't yell. I didn't cause the scene they were all suddenly hoping for. I walked to the gift table, found the silver box with my name on the tag, the one with a $5,000 check inside, and I picked it up. Then I turned around, looked my sister in the eye and said, +1 this? And I walked through the fairy lights past table 5, past my mother's frozen smile, out the big barn doors into the evening air. Behind me the room dropped to a murmur, then heels on gravel. Fast. My sister ran after me in front of everyone, silk train gathered in her fists. She caught my arm at the edge of the parking lot. The first words out of the bride's mouth were not an apology. You're embarrassing me at my own wedding. I turned around slowly, gift box under my arm. Guests had trailed out onto the porch to watch the way people gather at the window for weather. Embarrassing you, I repeated. Chloe, my seat is a folding chair next to the kitchen. It's overflow, it's logistics, she snapped, cheeks blazing under her perfect makeup. Why do you always have to make everything about you? Before I could answer, I heard the click of my mother's heels on the flagstone. Unhurried, regal, Lena Carter arrived wearing the smile she saves for witnesses. She leaned in close so the porch couldn't hear, and her voice came out sweet and cold at the same time. A trick I've never seen anyone else pull off. Get back inside and smile, you will not ruin this family's day. And there, in the gravel lot of a barn I had rented, I finally said the number out loud. Mom. I paid $21,000 for this day. My mother did not blink. She straightened up, smoothed her jacket, and delivered the sentence I will hear for the rest of my life. Family doesn't keep receipts. Then she took my sister's arm. The train got gathered up, and the two of them walked back toward the lights. Chloe threw one line over her shoulder, already smiling for the guests. The seat was just logistics. Stop making it about you. The band kicked back in before they even reached the doors. Some bright horn section song. The porch crowd drifted inside to dance. I stood alone in the parking lot holding a silver box with my own check in it. I drove the 40 minutes back to my townhouse with the gift on the passenger seat. The wipers came on somewhere around the county line, and her voice rode with me the whole way. That's where +1s sit. There were no tears that night. I did something much more dangerous. I opened my father's ledger. My kitchen table has hosted 100 tax seasons, but it had never seen an audit like the one I ran that night. I took off my heels, made coffee at 11 p.m. and laid it all out in rows. The barn contract, my signature. The catering contract, my signature. Florist, photographer, mine and mine. Bank statements going back 6 years. The $700 pulling out every month like a tide. The invoice for Mom's roof. The receipt for Chloe's transmission. I laid them out edge to edge until the table disappeared. Then I opened Dad's green ledger and started at the front where the entries are in his blocky mechanic's handwriting. Groceries, school shoes, Lena, brake pads, dance class, Chloe. Page after page of a man quietly turning labor into a family, never once taking a bow. I sat there in the small hours adding up what I had carried since he died. The total wasn't the part that hurt. The part that hurt was that I'd had to add it up to see it. The ledger's back cover has a vinyl pocket where Dad kept gas receipts. When I lifted the book to close it, the pocket bulged wrong. I reached in and pulled out an envelope soft with age, sealed, on the front in that same blocky hand, for Lena, when it gets heavy. I sat back down. Around me the whole table shone with paper. Every sheet of it proof of the same thing my family had turned into a punchline at a wedding. The clock over my stove ticked past 2. I held the envelope up to the light like it might tell me whether I was ready. My thumb found the corner of the flap, and I thought, 6 years, Dad, it's been heavy for 6 years. Then I opened my father's letter. The letter was dated 2 days before his heart surgery. The one the doctors called routine right up until it wasn't. 1 page, ruled paper, written with a ballpoint he kept behind his ear. Lena, if you're reading this, the shop's yours to sell. Don't let the buyer see you eager. Look after your mother, she's not as strong as she acts. And she acts instead of feeling, always has, you know that, look after Chloe. She's soft where you're solid, but hear me, kiddo, because I know exactly which daughter is going to end up holding this family, and I know what it does to a person. Help is a gift. A gift has to be received or it isn't giving anymore. It's just a bill nobody signed for. Don't let love make you the bank. A bank is a building people visit when they want something, be their family instead. Even when that costs less, even when it costs them. Love, Dad, I read it 3 times at that kitchen table, and the strangest thing happened. My shoulders came down from around my ears. Some muscle unclenching that had been holding since the funeral. My father had seen all of it. 6 years in advance. Sitting in a hospital admissions lounge with a ballpoint pen. He had watched his wife act instead of feel for 40 years. He knew. My dad asked me to take care of them. He never asked me to disappear so they could shine. I folded the letter and set it down gently on top of the barn contract. The heart and the arithmetic agreeing with each other for the first time all night. Then I refilled my coffee, opened my laptop, and created a new folder the way I would for any client whose accounts had been mismanaged. I named it Carter Family Closing the Books, and I started a list. Monday morning, I went to work on my own family with the calm of a quarterly filing. Item 1, the wedding gift. The $5,000 check was still sitting in its silver box on my counter because in their hurry to seat me with the kitchen, nobody had gotten around to opening gifts. I tore the check in half. Then, because I am my father's daughter and belts go with suspenders, I drove to the bank and put a stop payment on it anyway. The teller asked if the check was lost. I said no. Just the relationship. Item 2, the balances. What most people don't know is that wedding vendors collect deposits up front and the fat final invoices after. The caterer was owed $6,800. The videographer $3,400. Those final bills were addressed to the bride and groom. I had only ever promised out loud at a planning dinner to take care of them. So I wrote an email to Chloe and Derek, copied my mother, short and civil. I confirmed I would not be paying the remaining $10,200, wished them well, attached nothing, because I owed nothing. Item 3. My mother, I was not going to cut off a widow's electricity, whatever she'd done. I printed a letter and sent it certified mail. Effective in 60 days, the monthly $700 ends. Enclosed was a list of her providers and due dates, organized because I can't help myself. 60 days is enough time to arrange a life. It is not enough time to arrange a story. Which is the only thing I knew she'd actually work on. Item 4, the house. Chloe and Derek had a meeting on the calendar with a mortgage lender. I was expected there because Derek's commission income needed a cosigner with real books. I sent one line, "I won't be attending." Then I turned my phone face down and went to work. The phone did not enjoy its week. By Thursday, I had 17 missed calls and a voicemail box that read like a one-woman play. My mother's messages came in 3 acts. Act 1, weeping. "Lena, honey, I don't understand. We're family. Call your mother." Act 2, prosecution. "You are punishing your own mother over a chair, Lena. Your father would be ashamed of you." That one I listened to twice, standing at my kitchen counter looking at the drawer where his letter now lived. Ashamed. She had no idea what was in my house. Act 3. Weeping again, but angrier. Which is a skill. Chloe went with text. A long one about the videographer, capital letters blooming through it like mold. The wedding film was on hold until the balance cleared. Did I understand that their memories were being held hostage? I had promised. I looked at that text for a while. My sister was right about one thing I had promised. Back when I was the backbone and she was letting me believe it meant beloved. I typed my reply and kept it short. +1s don't pay balances. She did not text back. Derek tried next. Calling from a number I didn't know, using his salesman voice, the warm one with the handshake built in. "Lena, hey, let's be adults here. This is all one big misunderstanding." I told him I agreed completely. For 14 months I said I misunderstood my role. That's been corrected. He was still talking when I said goodnight and hung up gently. "The way you close a ledger." I slept 9 hours that night, deepest sleep in years. And I woke to my phone buzzing on the nightstand with a name that made me sit straight up in bed. Not my mother, not my sister. The screen said Patricia Hall. The other side of the aisle had started doing math. I did not answer Patricia's call, and I want to explain why, because it matters. I wasn't going to spend one breath campaigning against my mother. If you go around town telling your side, you become a side. Paper doesn't campaign, paper just waits, so I let it ring out. And Patricia Hall left a voicemail that was polite the way a frozen lake is smooth. "Lena, dear Patricia, the caterer contacted us this morning. Apparently he could not reach the children. There seems to be some confusion about the remaining balance. Diane assured us that everything was, quote, taken care of. I would like to understand by whom. Call me." By whom? 60 years old and she could load a question like a shotgun. That same afternoon my Aunt Ruth called, and Ruth does not do voicemail. Ruth does bulletins. "Well," she said, "it's spreading. Patricia's been telling the garden club the Carter side put in 30,000 because that's what your mother told them." In those words, the Carter side, meaning her, 30,000. My mother had not only taken credit for my money. She'd given herself a raise. Ruth wasn't finished. And at coffee hour Sunday your mom's going on about accounts shifting and paperwork transitions. Airy little words. Doris asked her flat out if she needed help with her bills and Diane laughed like Doris had told a joke. She paused. "Honey, the paint is peeling." I thanked her and was about to hang up when Ruth's voice changed. Dropped down to the register she used at Dad's funeral. "Come by Saturday," she said. "There's something about that seating chart you need to hear, and I'm not saying it on a telephone." I stood in my quiet office with the phone against my ear, and the check engine light in the back of my head came on again. Steady this time. Saturday could not come fast enough. Ruth's kitchen smells like percolator coffee and lemon oil. Nothing false has ever survived in it. She sat me down and got to it. "The Wednesday before the wedding I was at the planner's office helping fold napkins because your mother volunteers me for things. Dana had the seating chart printed on the table. The real one. I read it. Lena, table 1. Diane, the Halls, Ruth and Lena Carter, sister of the bride, right next to me. I saw your name in print." The percolator gurgled into the silence. "Then I get to that barn Saturday night," Ruth went on, "and you're on a folding chair by the kitchen like a coat nobody claimed. That is not the chart I saw. Somebody changed it at the last minute. And I know one more thing." She held up a finger. "Friday afternoon your mother told me she was going to the venue alone to finalize details. Her word, finalize." I sat with my coffee going cold. And a second memory surfaced, one I'd been carrying without understanding. Ruth leaned in. "There's worse. At the rehearsal, Chloe asked me why you refused to sit with family." Refused, Lena, that was her word. "And somebody fed it to her because you never refused a thing in your life. That's the trouble." So Monday morning I did what I do, not a phone call, an email to Dana the planner, businesslike. I noted that I was the signatory on 4 of her vendors' contracts and said that for my records I would like the final seating chart and any earlier versions with the revision history. Paper trail complete. Dana replied within the hour, apologetic, thorough, attaching both charts and her software's change log. I opened the log and read the last line, then read it again. Final revision Friday 5:41 in the afternoon. Requested by Lena Carter. I called Patricia Hall back on Tuesday on my lunch break from my office with the door shut. No speech prepared, just facts. Dressed for work. Patricia, it's Lena. You asked about the balances. Here's what I can tell you. I hold the 4 vendor contracts for the wedding. Venue, catering, florist, photography. I paid the $21,000 in deposits personally. I can forward copies if it would help you plan. There was a silence on that line so long I checked the screen to see if the call had dropped. When Patricia finally spoke, her voice had lost its garden club lacquer. Then what exactly did Diane pay for? I looked out my office window at the parking lot and gave her the honest answer. The story. I heard her exhale slow. The sound of a woman rearranging 2 years of dinner party impressions. Patricia Hall had spent this whole engagement believing she was merging with a solid family, and she had just learned the marble was contact paper. To her credit, she didn't gossip and she didn't gush. She asked 3 crisp questions about the caterer, thanked me, and then right before hanging up she slipped, and the house. Derek said your family was helping with the mortgage this month. The house, the lender meeting, the co-signature from the sister with real books. Was helping, I said. Past tense is doing a lot of work in this family lately. Another silence. Then something I never expected from Patricia Hall, a short, dry laugh, one professional to another. After the call I sat for a while, watching the light move across my desk. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt like I'd finally handed off a box I'd been carrying up a hill for years. 3 days later my sister found out what past tense costs. The lender meeting happened that Friday without me, which is to say, it barely happened at all. Derek's income was commission, feast, and famine, and the application had been built from the start around a cosigner with steady books and clean credit. Me, without my signature, the numbers did what numbers do. The loan died on the table. The dream house with the wraparound porch went back on the market, and the $2,000 they'd put down to hold it stayed behind. Gone. Per the contract nobody had read as carefully as I would have. Monday afternoon my sister walked into my office. No appointment. She stood in front of my desk in the middle of my workday, mascara smudged, wedding ring catching the light, and my receptionist hovering behind her like a referee. You're doing this because of one seat, Chloe said, voice cracking. One seat, Lena, you're blowing up my whole life over a chair. I asked my receptionist to give us a minute. Then I looked at my sister, 27 years old, standing in the office her transmission money had come from, and I kept my voice down where it lives. No, Chloe. I'm doing this because of every seat before it. She stared at me. Outside my window in the parking lot, Derek sat in his leased truck with the engine running. He hadn't bothered to come in. 2 years of my checks had bought that man's flowers and his film, and I wasn't worth a walk across a parking lot. Chloe turned to leave, got a hand on my door, and stopped. When she looked back, the anger had slipped. And underneath, it was something I hadn't seen since before the wedding. Confusion, the real kind. Mom said you refused to sit with us, she said quietly. At the reception, she said you refused. Did you? I looked at my sister for a long moment. Ask Mom about Friday 5:41 in the afternoon, I said, and I let her carry that home. While Chloe carried her question home, my mother was discovering arithmetic. The 60-day clock on my letter was ticking. And for the first time since my father died, Lena Carter had to learn what her own life cost. She called the insurance company and heard the price of her own premium for the first time. She studied the list of providers I had mailed her the way she used to study the church newsletter. Ruth reported it all to me like a nature documentary. Your mother told the women's circle that you manage her paperwork and the transition is complicated. Complicated, Lena, she made you sound like a filing error. But here's the thing about my Aunt Ruth. She has buried a brother, raised 2 kids on a nurse's salary, and she does not lie for anyone. Not even blood. So when my mother stood at coffee hour going on about paperwork transitions and poor Doris offered sympathy, Ruth set down her cup and said gently at full volume, "There's nothing complicated about it, Diane. The girl just stopped paying your bills." I'm told you could hear the percolator. I'm told my mother laughed it off in about 4 seconds, which in that room was a lifetime. The story was cracking, and my mother did what she always does when a story cracks. She scheduled a bigger performance. My phone rang that night and there was no crying in her voice this time, no acts 1 through 3. Just steel and stage direction. You will come to dinner Sunday, the Halls will be there. This family is going to sit down together and fix its reputation, and you are going to do your part. My part. I looked across my kitchen at the drawer with Dad's letter in it and at the folder on my table with a seating chart log inside. Final revision. Friday, 5:41 in the afternoon. Yes, Mom, I said, I'll come. I'll even bring dessert. She hung up satisfied. She had her stage, she just didn't know who'd printed the programs. I spent Saturday night preparing the way I'd prepare for an IRS audit. Which is to say calmly with a stapler. 5 sets of documents, one for each pair of adult eyes that would be at that table, each set in a plain manila folder. Page 1, the 4 vendor contracts. My signature under each. Page 2, 6 years of bank statements. The $700 highlighted every month. The roof. The transmission. Page 3, my email declining the $10,200 in balances. Polite as a thank you note. And the last page, the one I kept separate, printed on its own sheet and slid into only one folder, the seating charts. Original and final side by side. With Dana's revision log at the bottom. Final revision, Friday, 5:41 in the afternoon. Requested by Lena Carter. I decided that night what I was not going to do. I was not going to raise my voice. I was not going to ask for $1 back, not the $21,000, not the roof, not a cent, because chasing it would hand my mother the role she plays best, the persecuted widow. I wasn't going to ask for my money, I was going to give them the one bill they'd never budgeted for. The truth. Itemized. Ruth called while I was boxing up a lemon cake. Want backup tomorrow, she asked. Just sit where you can see Mom's face, I said. She laughed the low, warm laugh, my father's laugh, and told me Frank would have paid admission for this. After we hung up, I stood at my counter for a while with my hand flat on the stack of folders. The way you'd rest a hand on a Bible. Sunday dinner was set for 6. My mother had planned a performance. I was bringing an audit. Sunday, 5:50. I parked across the street from my mother's house and sat in the car for a minute. Folders on the passenger seat. Lemon cake riding in back. The porch light was on. New bulb, she'd have had to change it herself. Through the front window I could see the dining room glowing and my mother moving around the table in her hosting dress, setting out my grandmother's wedding china. The plates that only surface when there's an audience worth impressing. Patricia and Tom Hall were already seated, wine glasses catching the lamplight. Derek stood at the sideboard pouring like he owned the house. And Chloe. My sister sat at the end of the table, twisting her new wedding ring around and around her finger, looking at the china like it might bite her. Somewhere between my office and this dinner, the question I'd handed her had been doing its work. I got out, crossed the street, and stood on the porch my checks had kept dry, listening for a second before I knocked. My mother's voice floated through the door, bright as a hostess bell aimed at Patricia. Lena has agreed to straighten everything out tonight. She just needed time to cool down. She's always been the dramatic one. I stood there with a cake box balanced on 5 manila folders and nearly laughed. The dramatic one. 40 years of watching this woman work a room and she could still find a way to sell tickets to my surrender. That's where +1s sit, said the bell-bright voice in my memory, and I let it ring. Because tonight it was useful. I shifted the cake, raised my hand, and knocked on a door I used to walk straight through, heels on hardwood, the lock, the swing of hinges. My mother opened the door wearing the smile she saves for witnesses. There she is, she announced to the room. There's our girl. The dining room smelled like pot roast and lemon pledge, the official perfume of my mother's ambushes. 6 chairs at the table, all full or claimed, Diane at the head, the Halls along one side, Ruth across from them. Chloe and Derek paired at the far end, and for me, wedged into the corner by the hutch, my mother had set up a folding chair from the garage. The metal kind, with a cushion tossed on it like an apology nobody meant. We ran short of chairs, sweetheart, she said, patting my shoulder as she glided past. She didn't even hear it. Ruth heard it. Her eyebrows went up into her bangs and she looked at me across the room with an expression that said, "Is she serious?" Patricia heard it too. I watched Derek's mother clock that folding chair, then me, then the good china, and file it all somewhere behind her pearls. I set the lemon cake on the sideboard, sat down on the folding chair without a word, and placed my stack of folders on the tablecloth in front of me, squared to the table edge. Grace was said. Dishes went around. My mother waited until everyone had food on their plates, because a full plate pins a guest better than any rope, and then she dinged her wine glass with her knife and beamed down the table. Now before dessert, Lena has something she'd like to say to everyone. She turned to me, glowing with mercy. She wants to apologize for the scene at the wedding, and she's going to be resuming her little contributions to this family. Aren't you, sweetheart? Every head turned. The Halls looked at me with careful, neutral faces. Derek smirked into his wine. Chloe had gone pale around the lipstick. Ruth leaned back like a woman settling in at the movies. I looked down the length of my grandmother's china at my mother, and I slid the top folder off my stack. Actually, I said, I brought my apology in writing. I passed the folders around the table the way I'd hand out statements at a client meeting. One for the Halls to share, one for Ruth, one for Chloe and Derek, one for my mother. The last set with its extra page stayed under my hand. Please eat while you read, I said. It's organized chronologically. My mother's smile held, but her eyes had gone flat and fast, scanning for the exits. I kept my voice level, the voice I use for nervous widows and audited plumbers, and I walked them through it. Page 1, 4 vendor contracts for the wedding. Venue, catering, florist, photography, that's my signature on all 4 and my $21,000 in deposits. Paper rustled. Page 2. 6 years of monthly transfers covering this house's utilities and insurance. $700 a month. The roof over your heads tonight, that invoice is there too. Chloe's transmission. Bottom of the page. Tom Hall, a man who has read a contract or two, was going line by line with his dinner napkin still tucked in his collar, nodding slowly at each page like a juror. I want to be clear about why I'm showing you this, I said. I'm not asking for $1 back, I'm correcting the record. Those are different things. My mother laughed then, a bright hostess laugh with nothing behind it, and waved her hand at the folders. Numbers, she said. Cold, ugly numbers. This is what Lena does instead of loving people. She keeps score. And that might have worked. It had worked for years. Except Patricia Hall lifted her eyes from page 1 with the look of a woman who has just rebalanced an entire relationship in her head. Diane, she said quietly, you told us you paid $30,000. My mother stood up so fast her chair barked against the hardwood. 61 years old, and she went from hostess to hurricane in one breath. I raised these girls alone, she cried, hand flying to her chest, voice pitched for the back row of a theater none of us were sitting in. Across the table Ruth said mildly to no one in particular. Frank died 6 years ago, Diane. The girls were grown women. My mother pivoted without missing a beat. A new act, the prosecutor. This is what she does. Lena always needs to be the hero. She always needs the credit. She waves her little papers around because she has no family of her own to love. The hall sat very still. The way you do near a downed power line. Derek studied his wine. And I stayed in my folding chair, hands flat on the last folder, and let her burn through her repertoire. Because I have watched this show my whole life and I know it only has 3 acts. Weeping, blaming. And then, when neither works, the threat. It came right on schedule. She leaned over the table, china rattling, finger aimed at me, voice dropping into something older and colder. If you do this, Lena, you have no family. Do you hear me? None. The pot roast steamed gently between us. I looked up at my mother and I did not raise my voice, and the whole room leaned in to hear me anyway, which is a thing I learned that night. That quiet outbids loud every time. Mom, sit down, there's 1 page left. She didn't sit, but she stopped. 1 page, I said, then I'm done. And it was Chloe, pale, twisting her ring, who broke the silence. Barely a whisper. What page? I took the last page out of my folder, stood and walked it down the table, not to my mother, to my sister. I set it in front of Chloe on top of her untouched plate and went back to my folding chair. She read it, 2 seatings printed side by side. On the left, the planner's original. Table 1, Diane Carter, Tom and Patricia Hall, Ruth Howard and Lena Carter, sister of the bride. My name in print, next to family. On the right, the final version, my name gone from every table. And underneath, 1 line from the planner's revision log, final change, Friday, 5:41 in the afternoon. Requested by Diane Carter. My sister read it once fast and once slow, and her hand came up over her mouth. Mom, her voice didn't sound 27. You moved her, you told me she refused to sit with us. You had me thinking she looked down on my wedding, you had me believing it for months, and she stopped, and her eyes came up to mine, wet and horrified. I said that to her face because of you. For 3 full seconds my mother tried to hold the pose. That log is a mistake, those computer things. And then, watching it fail in every face around the table, she swerved. And the truth came out of her sideways, the only way it ever travels. I did it for you, she snapped at Chloe. The Halls did not need your sister sitting at that table being asked who paid for what. They didn't need to see our mess. Silence. Then Derek, God bless his timing, chuckled into his glass. It was 1 chair, ladies. Patricia turned to her son slowly, like a lighthouse coming around. You knew. Every eye in that dining room came to me, waiting for the explosion my mother had spent weeks advertising. The dramatic one. Instead, I stood up, straightened my grandmother's silverware where I'd sat, and then I picked up the folding chair I'd been given, collapsed it flat with 1 clean motion, and leaned it against the wall by the hutch. The little clack of the hinges was the loudest thing in the house. "You gave me the +1 seat," I said to the table in the voice I use for closing statements. "All right, but +1s don't co-sign mortgages. +1s don't fund weddings. +1s don't pay a widow's insurance for 6 years." I turned to my mother, who stood gripping the back of her chair with both hands. "You told me family doesn't keep receipts." "You were right, Mom, family doesn't." I tapped the folder on the table once gently like a gavel. "+1s do, and you're the one who made me one." Nobody moved. Tom Hall was looking at my mother the way you look at a car lot that rolled back an odometer. Ruth had tears standing in her eyes and the ghost of my father's grin underneath them. And Chloe sat with the chart in both hands, holding it like it was the only solid thing in the room. To her, and only to her, I softened. "Chloe, when you're ready to own the thing you said, not the script Mom handed you, you know where my office is." I picked up my purse and my one remaining folder and I left the lemon cake. Because Ruth deserved dessert. My mother found her voice as I reached the hallway. One last register I'd never heard from her before, raw and cracking. "Don't you dare walk out that door, Lena. Don't you dare." I looked back at her from the doorway of the house my money had kept standing, and I gave her the only line I had left. "Watch me." And I did it slowly, down the hall, out the door. And this time nobody ran after me. I was halfway down the walk when the screen door creaked. And for one strange second the wedding replayed itself. Footsteps behind me, someone calling my name. But it was Ruth, carrying her purse and 2 plates of lemon cake, one for each of us. Because my aunt does not leave a battlefield without provisions. We stood by my car in the porch light, eating cake off my grandmother's china like felons together. "Frank would have folded that chair the exact same way," she said. "Same little click and everything." That was the first time I smiled all night. Through the front window the show was ending without me. The Halls were gathering their coats. Patricia's spine straight as a fence post. Tom shaking his head at something Derek was still trying to sell him. My mother stood at the head of her table, still talking, gesturing at the folders, performing for a room that was putting its coat on. And at the far end sat my sister, not moving, not talking, just looking down at that page in her hands, reading it again in the candlelight like it might come out different. Ruth followed my eyes and patted my arm. "Give that one time," she said, the truth still settling on her. I drove home with the cake plate on my passenger seat where a gift box used to ride. The performance was over. The accounting wasn't. 3 weeks later somebody knocked on my office door. It was Chloe. Alone, no Derek idling in the parking lot, no mother staged behind her, no mascara tracks for an audience. My sister stood in my doorway on a Tuesday afternoon in a cardigan, holding an envelope, and asked if I had 10 minutes. She sat in the chair across my desk, a real one, and slid the envelope over. Inside was a check for $400 made out to me in her handwriting. On the memo line she had written, "Wedding balance," one of many. Behind it, folded into quarters and soft at the creases from handling, was the seating chart page. She'd been carrying it. "Mom lied," she said. "I know that now. But Lena, the words were mine." Nobody stood behind me at that reception feeding me a script. "You asked me a simple question and I chose the cruel answer because the easy story about you, the bossy one, the show-off, made me feel better about taking everything you gave." I said it. I own it. She didn't cry at me. She didn't ask me to say it was fine. She asked for a payment plan. God help her, like a true Carter, and something in my chest shifted on its foundation. I took the check. "I'm an accountant. We forgive in installments." We had coffee that Friday and the first Friday of every month since. Not the old way where I paid and she sparkled, from zero. Like strangers who happen to share a father's eyes, some Fridays are easy, some are quiet, all of them are real, and real is the only currency I accept anymore. As for the rest of the ledger, Derek and Chloe are still renting, saving for a place their own numbers can carry, which is a sentence I never thought I'd say with respect. Patricia Hall sends me a card every holiday, sharp-cornered and sincere. And my mother tells anyone at church who will still listen that her ungrateful daughter abandoned her, then goes home and pays her own electric bill every month on time. Her letters sit in my desk drawer, unopened, not burned. Unopened, there's a difference, and she knows how to close it. It starts with owning what she did on a Friday at 5:41 in the afternoon. Last month I took out Dad's green ledger, turned past 6 years of everybody else's emergencies and made the final entry in the family's books. Paid in full, my own seat, then I closed the cover, and it sounded like a door I was glad to hear shut. So here is the one thing I know now that I didn't know at that wedding. If they hand you a folding chair after you built the table, don't argue about the seating. Just take back everything that kept the table standing. And watch how fast they learn your name. That's my story. One folding chair. $21,000. And a mother who finally met the word no. If you've ever been the family bank, the family planner, and the family afterthought all at once, take this as your sign to close the books. Share this with someone who needs it. Drop a comment with your story, and I'll see you in the next one.